This is The Bottom Line with Buea.
Hello there, and a very warm welcome to your program, The Bottom Line, with your host, Buea. Today, we are going to dwell on the worthiness or the usefulness of a PhD. What's the worth of a PhD today in Cameroon and the world at large? A Doctor of Philosophy, or PhD, as it is commonly called, is the highest level of academic achievement in any discipline. A PhD candidate must submit a written thesis which must be original in its work, make significant contribution to knowledge within a specific domain, and worthy of publication in a peer-reviewed journal. Up into the last 2 decades, those who undertook a PhD did so because they wanted to pursue a career in research and academia. Those who possessed a PhD were few and far between the society, and were held in very high esteem. But today, any Tom and Dick can boast of having a PhD or Doctor of Philosophy because they can pay a professional writer and jury to present the thesis. Today we have the singular pleasure to welcome Professor Titanji, who was formerly the Vice Chancellor of the University of Buea. Professor, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Is that an appropriate overview of what a PhD is all about?
In part, yes. I agree with you that it is a terminal qualification. I also agree with you that it endows the candidate with the capacity to think independently, provides him with analytical tools, and most especially the test is that the candidate has significantly advanced knowledge or the frontier of knowledge in his or her field of research where he has done the PhD. Those attributes are quite correct, and those are international.
Yes, Professor, people want to know the trajectory of Professor Vincent Titanji, his academic background before becoming lecturer in the University of Buea, before becoming the Vice Chancellor. I mean, people want to know, how did you follow your academic courses until you became the Vice Chancellor of the University of Buea?
Well, in the university there are 2 ladders. There's the administrative ladder, which goes from department head or head of service through vice dean, and deputy vice chancellor, and then vice chancellor or rector. And for that, most lecturers don't have any influence on that.
Yeah.
That is something which is done by the administration of the university. But there is the academic ladder, where you go from assistant lecturer, associate professor, to full professor. I entered the Cameroon higher education system in 1982 as a full lecturer. I had earned my PhD in physiological chemistry from one of the oldest universities in Europe, from Uppsala University.
That's where exactly?
Yes, in Sweden.
Sweden, right.
I earned the PhD there. I did 5 years there to earn my PhD in physiological chemistry or biochemistry. And then, before then, I had attended the Lomonosov Moscow State University in Soviet Union, now Russia.
For how long?
For another 6 years, during which time I earned a master's degree in animal biochemistry. I may say that Lomonosov at that time was called the Eastern Harvard. It was the oldest, best equipped, and the most advanced university, and even today it still is counted among the 200 top universities in the world. So that is the courses I had. Before then, I had studied in Cameroon.
University of Yaoundé?
No. I finished secondary school at Cameroon Protestant College, Bali. Won a government scholarship to study in Russia. And the first year of stay in Russia was at Voronezh University, where I studied Russian language and upgraded my knowledge to the level that the Soviet schools required for entry into the university. At the end, I passed the university entrance examination very well, which then enabled me to be selected among the few to be accepted at the Moscow State University. So that's my courses before I came to Cameroon. When I entered the University of Yaoundé, I progressively did research and walked up the academic ladder to associate professor in 1988, and then 10 years later to full professor. Along the line, the government saw some worth in my capacity and then appointed me in various positions.
Don't you think the government uses political pressure at times to make people from some regions to become professors? Because there's also like this issue of regional balance. They want maybe all the regions to also be represented in having PhDs.
No, I don't think so. We have in Cameroon a very rigorous system for evaluation of academic staff in state universities. There is a commission which is called CCIU, Comité Consultatif Interuniversitaire, which is something like an appointment and promotions committee, and it is set up in a very rigorous manner with experts, more than 300 experts who sit in their various sections and look at the work of the academic staff. From there it moves to another level, and finally it comes to the committee, and the external referees are used to evaluate the work. And so it is not possible to use political pressure to get promotion through that commission. At least I served on that commission for 9 years. It's impossible.
Yeah, Prof, you know that this conversation...
And let me just add that the final awarding session is the committee is made of experts from the various 7 domains that have been 3 each, and the minister chairs, but the minister does not vote. Only the members of that commission.
What you're saying, it concerns government or state-run universities, but private universities, are they also subjected to that scrutiny?
Yes, because all private universities in Cameroon today, there are 476 plus higher institutions, are all under the supervision of the 12 or 11 state universities. So they do not award their own degrees. They award degrees either through the supervisory university or in collaboration with the supervisory university. I will make exception of 2 universities. That is the Catholic University of Central Africa, which was accredited as a full university before the these laws came in 2005, and the I think Adventist University Condensai. But even these 2 universities, their degrees must be vetted by the Ministry of Higher Education. So there, the state and the private universities, when it comes to accreditation and to the award of degrees, they are controlled by the same mechanism.
Yeah, Prof, you understand that this conversation about the usefulness or the worthiness of PhDs has been triggered by the ministerial decision, that is the Minister of State in charge of higher education, Professor Famen Dongo, who recently suspended the defense of PhDs in all the universities of Cameroon. Is that move called for?
I don't think the minister suspended the defense of PhDs. He suspended admission of new students. And the justification for that was that the system had become oversubscribed, underfunded, and was not functioning properly to give results at the desired level. So the instruction came, or directive to the universities came from the ministry, as I understand. I'm no longer in active service, but I understand that the directives came for them to review the current backlog of PhD students who were stagnating, some for 5 years, some for 10 years. Whereas the process, if it functioned normally, should be completed within 3 to 5 years. So this backlog of students was one of the motivation, and the oversubscription. Some supervisors had 20 students, some had 30. There was even an extreme case of a supervisor who had 100 PhD students. Unheard of.
Prof, when you talk about oversubscription of PhD students, this same minister is the person who is supposed to be the guarantor of the laws in the obtention of the PhD. He's the one who came out with the multiplicity of the universities, creating universities, because most people, from what I hear, they go to the Minister of Higher Education, meet the minister, it's like someone is paid. I'm not saying this is what we hear. So how it means that the rules are not being respected?
No, I think you completely misunderstand me. You see, for a university or an academic department to offer training at the doctoral level, they need to be accredited. And as far as I know, most of the doctoral schools are in the state universities. I will make an exception of the 2 universities, private universities that were accredited. And therefore, it is entirely wrong to say that because of the proliferation of higher education institutions, then you had an influx of PhD students.
Because you were talking about 437
476, that was the figure we had last year, of private higher institutions. Some of them are only in one subject. Some of them are into, they are not really universities, they are higher education institutions. And they are coordinated and supervised by the state universities. So they are like extensions of the state university.
And where you are rector today, the landmark Metropolitan University,
yes.
In which domains is that university specialized? Just 1, 2, or so many?
Engineering, health sciences, excluding medicine, that is paramedical sciences, and then agriculture, and we also have business and social sciences.
And since the inception of this university, how has it been faring? I mean, the landmark Metropolitan University.
It is a fairly young institution.
How old?
It was created, I think, in 2015, and it has been growing. It was a higher institute, and now, since last year, it has been upgraded into a university institute, and it trains at the HND, at the bachelor's and the master's. We are not yet staffed enough to train at the doctoral level. So if we have doctoral, we have our younger staff who want to get a doctoral degree, they have to go to one of the state universities.
Prof, before we continue this program, I would like to state some of the fundamentals before creating a university. I want to read them one after the other. There are 5 of them. And you tell me whether most of the universities in Cameroon do follow these fundamentals. Let me start. The first one is there must be a mission statement. Define the education philosophy of the institution.
Yes.
The second is the funding. Secure substantial financial resources through donations, grants, or loans.
Yes.
Infrastructure. Establish physical or virtual facilities that can comply with health and safety regulations.
Yes.
The last one is faculty. Hire qualified staff and develop a curriculum that meets educational standards. Are all these fundamentals being made with the universities that you're talking about, that we have in Cameroon?
Well, the state universities, no doubt. The private higher institutions, one-on-one, have to be inspected and vetted, and they are only authorized to function when they have met all these criteria. First of all, you get an authorization to create, then you go and build up and gather your staff, and you come back and you get another authorization now to open. And then as you have opened, the ministry sends expert teams twice or thrice a year to follow up. And what the public doesn't know is that every single examination written in a private higher education institution has been vetted by the mentor university. Like Landmark, where I work, is mentored by the University of Buea.
Yes, let's come back to Buea, for example.
So I'm trying to address your question.
Yes.
That there are mechanisms in place for quality control.
This mechanism from all educations are not being followed.
That is another issue altogether. Whether they are being followed or they are not being followed, I've worked in 2 private higher education institutions. I've worked at the Cameroon Christian University Institute, and I have also in Bali. I was the rector there until the war started, and then I came down here. And I've worked at Landmark now for nearly a year. In October it will be a year. I see that the University of Buea is doing an excellent job in following the universities, the higher institutions which it's mentoring.
Good. I want to see the.
No, let me just answer your question. And it's doing an excellent job because it follows all the exams, it follows the syllabuses, and the ministry too is doing an excellent job because there is a commission in the ministry that meets, I think, once or twice a year.
That's in theory.
To review.
That is in theory, Prof. In practice, it is a different story.
Okay.
Because
you know better.
Yeah, because Buea, for example, and the vicinity of Buea, we have more than 20 higher institutions of learning.
Yes.
The quality is still lacking. When you look around, there are so many of them being mentored by the University of Buea.
No, not all of them. University of Buea can speak for itself, and you can speak to the rector, yes. Who is a well-respected academic. The University of Buea does not necessarily mentor all the universities
around Buea.
Yes, all the private universities around Buea. It mentors some of them, and even some of these private higher institutions have 2 or 3 universities mentoring them. Some are mentored by Buea, Douala, and Bamenda. Some are mentored even by Ngaoundéré. It depends upon the area of specialization that the private university wants to take, that it then chooses the mentor. I think if you are going for quality control, you should ask yourself, have the graduates of our public and private universities performed well in the jobs that they were trained? And I would say yes, but there is a scarcity of jobs. advertise any position you want here in Cameroon. You will get 5, 10, 20, sometimes even 100 people postulating for that one position.
Yeah, Prof. In some state universities, there is a bulk of PhD production.
Yes.
This actually devalues the PhD student, yes, because it is like a business now. They sell these PhD productions instead of them performing in the field. I mean, it's like business now.
I would differ from you. I would like to say that I have spent all my life working for the state universities. That is before my retirement. And the PhD process is very rigorous. It cannot be rushed. In order to advance the frontier of knowledge, you have to put in some work. You have to put in some imagination and produce a thesis that is worthy of the name and the characteristics that you described. But if the system is over-subscribed, too many students to one supervisor, and if the system is underfunded, there isn't specific funding for the PhD research, then the quality can be affected. And the fact that the quality is affected is attested to by the fact that it takes too long for students to graduate, because the juries are holding on to the high standards. And the students
some say it's about money. I mean, you give money and then you defend the thesis and quickly you are awarded a PhD.
You are making a statement for which universities can sue you, and you should be able to.
Excuse me, I'm a reporter, I'm a journalist. I live with the masses there, and these are the stories that we get.
My experience is that when the PhD training is not adequately funded and adequately staffed, it takes too long for students to graduate. But when the students do graduate, in the vast majority of the cases, they have met the standard. So if a person, a candidate takes 10 years, 8 years to do a job which would have been done in 3 years, that tells you something. It should not tell you that the standards have been lowered. It should tell you that the student has taken too long to meet the standards.
Okay, but Professor, basically a PhD or a doctoral program is meant to solve societal problems, as we said earlier. But in Cameroon, there is this image that remains vivid in our minds, where some PhD holders in Yaoundé were protesting in front of the Prime Minister's office that they were not being recruited into state universities or other government structures to work for the government. We were expecting these PhD holders to solve problems, create jobs for other Cameroonians, but they are there protesting that they are not being recruited. That image does not represent well for the PhD holder.
Well, I will not make value judgment on the action taken by those PhD holders, but I would like to tell you that those problems were solved, and those students were listened to, and those graduates were listened to, and their problems were solved. But let us get back to one fundamental misunderstanding. The PhD degree, Doctor of Philosophy degree, is a degree that is earned through research, and that research must significantly advance the frontier of knowledge. It is not a degree which creates entrepreneurs. It's not a degree which creates engineers. If you want to be a good engineer, you get your master's degree in engineering and you don't need a doctorate. If you want to be to go out and make a lot of money as a trader, you get your first degree or your second degree and off you go. If you go into a PhD, you are in the area of advancing knowledge. And now let me tell you, how can governments and funders of PhD ensure that you advance the knowledge in such a way that they benefit from it? That is by having a research foundation or a research funding mechanism which specifically funds PhD research in given areas. If today the preoccupation is to enhance import substitution, for instance, then you can put out for competition a number of PhD and master's fellowships, fully funded. And on basis of competence, researchers will do research in that. And the results will then be immediately appropriated and implemented. But if you tell the students, okay, you can pay 50,000 francs a year, go in and do your PhD, the student will look for that domain of knowledge which is lacking, and he will advance it to the satisfaction of the jury and get his PhD. And then you will be saying he should now come and solve a problem for which you didn't fund. Most of the PhDs, let me just tell you, most of the PhDs in the sciences have been funded by grants from the European Union, the WHO, the USAID, Bill Gates Foundation, and other funding mechanisms, even some grants from the French Corporation and so on. And this funding is not given open-ended. It's always given to fund research in a particular area, infectious diseases, or it may be given in material sciences and so on. When you finish the thesis, sometimes there has been patentable results inside. The patent is now shared between the university and the funder. So we should not sit around grumbling that our PhD graduates are not doing what we ought to do, or they ought to do. We should instead put in place a mechanism that funds PhD research in those areas that we think are priority.
Professor, let's look at the award of PhDs in two countries. I would like to take Russia. You studied in Russia.
Yep.
That's the former Soviet Union and Malaysia.
Yeah.
In Russia, you are awarded a PhD when you must have done something concrete and people see it.
Yes.
That's when they give you the PhD.
Yes.
In Malaysia, just like in Cameroon, you defend a thesis in front of a panel of experts, and you must have produced about 2 or 3 peer review journals.
Yes.
So which one do you think is better now, the Russian experience or the Malaysian or Cameroonian experience?
Well, unfortunately, the comparison is not appropriate. The Russian run a 2-tier doctoral system. There is the first doctorate, which is called Kandidat Nauk, candidate of science. And then there is the final upper doctorate, which is called Doctor Nauk, which approximately translates to Doctor of Science. In the first doctorate, which is somewhere between what we used to call troisième cycle here and the PhD,
Yeah.
the candidate fulfills what you have described, at least 3 publications and in an area. And whereas for the Doctor Nauk, the person gets employment either in a research institute, in industry, or with the government in a university, and they accumulate results which are translatable or translated. It takes sometimes 5 years after the first doctorate. Sometimes it takes 10 years. And then when you are confirmed as a doctor of science, you can point to a product, you can point to an innovation which you have done, or several innovations. So that route is not followed anymore since the introduction of the BMP system, because it was too long and too restrictive. Only a few people ended up being Doctor Nauk or Doctor of Science. Okay? In Sweden, where I studied, they had also that two-tier system, which I got my PhD in 1978, and 10 years afterwards I got the docent, when I could show them what I had done as research independently after my PhD. I went there and got the second tier when I was already working and producing. So the two-tier system is too restrictive, and all over the world, especially in Western Europe and before then in America, they have a single doctoral system, and Malaysia, which you mentioned. So I would say that you cannot compare apples to bananas. You have to compare two things.
Yes, Prof, let's look at the award of the PhDs in the sciences and the social sciences. That is the hard sciences and the social sciences.
Yes.
These hard sciences actually they actually foster in the the continuance of knowledge. People learn. It's clear when you see it. You know that this is something that has been added to humanity. That has been added to knowledge, the global knowledge. But with the social sciences, it is something that is a bit in a context. People just have maybe to teach or to do one or two things. Which of the two do you prefer?
I think a PhD is a PhD. You know, before our predecessors, after the Renaissance in the 1600s, when the concept of having a doctorate was developed first in Germany and then it came to Britain and other countries, science was one. So there was the difference between humanities and social sciences was not at the same time, was not so sharply divided. But even then, to be a doctor, there was a significant component of erudition, that you have acquired and gathered a lot of knowledge. But there was also the other component of production of knowledge. Now, I think in the social sciences, I've been rector several times, and I have seen theses from all the university, because one of the duties of a rector is to authorize for theses to be defended. I think the social sciences too have their own criteria of excellence. They advance knowledge in specific ways, which is also measurable, and it can be measurable through peer-reviewed dissertations. So to condemn that people just put in together work which is not worth anything and got a PhD, I would say, why don't you be specific? Because those juries which approve those theses in the social sciences, and I can speak for University of Yaoundé, where I was a lecturer and associate professor for 14 years. I can speak for the University of Buea and University of Chang, where I've been both internal and external examiners. There are theses which fail, both in the sciences and social sciences.
Yeah,
only that the vetting procedure is so long that many theses fail and they never reach the defense panel. So you don't know that they have been weeding. You think that everybody can put together anything and defend. It doesn't work that way.
No, what we are saying is that the sciences add more to humanity than the social sciences.
Can you imagine a country where there are no laws, where there are there is no social cohesion, where there is not the elevation of social conscience for ethics and so on? Would that society to survive? That is where the social sciences are focusing. They are focusing on greasing the machinery of society.
Yes.
And
yes,
you see that attitudes change. You see that new ways of solving problems, even problems of democracy, they change. If there were no people in the social sciences to reflect on this and adjust this to the technologies that the hard sciences are producing, we would be in a very, very difficult situation.
Yeah,
so, let me just end one thing.
Yeah.
One of my contributions to curriculum development was to go for holistic education. People in the hard sciences, STEM disciplines, should learn a dose of social sciences. And people in the social sciences should also learn a dose of the hard sciences. Because
that is
for society to function, you must have the two arms.
Yeah, but let's not make any mistake, Prof. Not all PhDs are the same. There are some people who have completely submerged themselves within a particular domain. With the more, they take more thorough and deeper learning paths. And there are others who are just there to have a degree, come out with a professor degree. But some people, they are given specific domains. Their whole livelihood is based on what they are doing, and they come out with results. But some people just want to have that certificate and brandish it. Because I'll give the example of Cameroon. I was talking about ministers and some senior government officials. No sooner have they been appointed than have they started brandishing degrees of PhD degrees that we don't know when they actually obtain these degrees. That's what we have in our society.
I can only speak for degrees that have been duly supervised and vetted by the universities. If people go online and get their PhDs, we do not have any quality control. And the liberty laws in our country allow people to say whatever they can say. Somebody can call himself a doctor of science, whereas they actually...
traditional doctors have been called themselves doctors.
Yes, those are under the liberty laws. So we must have in place mechanisms to sift the fake from the authentic. And this is not a task for the universities. If a person says he has a PhD, he should put in bracket the name of the university from which he got the PhD. I often sign PhD Uppsala. I know of my colleagues who signed PhD London. I know of my students who signed PhD University of Buea. And everywhere they go, they are well received.
True. Prof, we have artificial intelligence now, or AI, that is really facilitating the obtention of these PhDs or even masters and other degrees. Is it a welcome move that we should embrace artificial intelligence, or it is going to actually bring us back? Because people don't really read as they used to read before. Because before, you remember, people they had to go to different continents, different places to get data and documentation. But today, you sit on your computer, you get information, and everything is done.
I think artificial intelligence is here to stay. It is a natural stage in the development of the information communication technology. It is both a blessing and it can be abused. The real question now is to put in place mechanisms to be able to identify what is the real contribution of the candidate and what is just information that is gotten from the internet. And the PhD defense is actually one of those mechanisms, because in the PhD defense the candidate is allowed to explain what they have done, and then there's a conversation with the jury. Even before we go to the defense, each of the jury members had read the thesis and submitted a report with a verdict of yes, defend, or no, don't defend. So if you have gone and played on the computer and got a lot of data and put in your thesis, at the defense it will collapse. At the pre-defense it will collapse. Also, there are today a lot of packages for plagiarism check. I am the editor of the Journal of Cameroon Academy of Sciences for more than 20 years. And we get articles of all kinds. Some of them even not in the fields that we have people in the country who can review, and then we send those out. But we do a simple plagiarism check. You send us an article, we put it in this software, in that software, and the whole thing turns yellow. Means that you have copied it from everywhere, and then we just write to you and say this article is not suitable for our journal, because we don't want to be taken
for a
to court.
country like Cameroon. Don't you think that we can just forget about the PhD and concentrate on our professional education so that we move forward faster? Because it's like the PhD is actually bringing us a bit backwards.
Oh, it would be a grievous error, a serious error, to suppress the PhD learning level of training in our country. In fact, if I had one recommendation to make, it would be that we restructure the PhD, fund it, put in place all the quality control mechanisms, because the PhD researchers are like hunters. They are out there to look for what is new, what is useful, what can be used. And if we do not send our own hunters to the field of unknown, and we allow others to do it, their hunters, when they get the game, they will first eat, be satisfied, before, if any crumbs are left, they will bring to us.
That is clear, Lord, that is clear. That is
so we are in for the PhD, and the government has made a good decision to allow the universities to create doctoral schools, create frameworks for training of PhD. What is left now is to fund this, and fund it in a way that addresses the issues that concern us most.
We are moving towards the end of our interview. Professor, you are an educator and you hail from the Northwest, one of these two regions that are being hit by the social political conflict for the past 8 years now. What would you say is a way for us to get out of this conflict and come back to a state of normalcy?
It is a hard question, and I think that the first is that we should recognize that our country, Cameroon, is one and indivisible. Within that framework, the government and the armed combatants should find a way to accommodate, because as the fighting goes on, it is the population that is suffering.
And we are actually suffering.
So I think that it is high time for this conflict to end, and we return to normalcy and continue dialoguing. There's not a time for any country when every citizen will be satisfied about where he or she is. There's no country in the world like that. But people can discuss, look for ways of bettering their conditions without killing each other. I think it is a tragedy that our country, these two regions, degenerated into war, and our prayers and efforts must be to end this war definitively.
You have studied in the West. You talked of Sweden and Russia, and you know the role the diaspora is playing in this conflict. What is the message you are telling them? I mean, what role should they actually play, because they are playing a very disruptive role in this
The only message I can tell whosoever is funding war is that it is wrong, it is illegal, it is immoral, and it should be stopped. Because nothing can be gained from chaos. We cannot make advancement into chaos. The people in the diaspora who are funding the war should know that it is not the way to go. We should look for ways to discuss the issues and then come to a peaceful understanding.
And do you think that you from the Northwest, where say the former Southern Cameroon, you think that this is the time for an Anglophone president to become at the head of state, so that he can actually facilitate the return of normalcy as we're talking about?
I would have said this is out of topic, as our decision, our interview was about the value of PhDs and how it should be done. Now you're bringing in politics. In Cameroon, the laws are such that any Cameroonian from any region, including North or South, or can become president. During presidential election, we scarcely have less than 15 candidates. So go out.
A particular context where there is crisis in these two.
No, I don't think they should be. We should fall into the temptation of saying if this region has a problem, then they should have a president. That's not the solution. The solution is that if you want to become president, form a political party, bring out your program, convince the citizens, they vote you, you become a president. That's what the law says.
Thank you for talking to Bottom Line, Professor.
Thank you. Thank you.
This is The Bottom Line with Onimwa.